2012 Dodge Ram 1500 with the 5.7 liter HEMI. This is the four-wheel drive model. Not that I think that's going to make much difference, because today we're going to be doing the rear brake pads and rotors. Let's get to it. First step will obviously be to remove the rear tires. They are held on with 22mm lug bolts. Or lug nuts. And with everything else, this is one of those models that has the lug nuts that like to swell. So, enjoy having a fun time with this. Hate that because it makes my truck shake on the lift. And no matter how long I've been doing this for, vehicles shaking on a lift still scare the religion out of me. Come on. Next, the caliper on the rear is held in by two 10mm bolts. And if you get one like this that's stuck and doesn't want to come off, if you get a caliper that's stuck like this one and does not want to come off, you can actually compress the piston inside of the caliper just a hair by putting a screwdriver into the rotor, gently prying onto the caliper piston, and that'll push that piston in just a little bit so you can get that clearance you need to remove it. Now these brake pads on this side actually look pretty good. The other side, they were metal on metal, so one thing you need to know about this rear one right here is that it has to be rotated off to get it past these little brackets right here on the caliper mounting bracket. So when you're reinstalling your new brake pad, you're going to put it in kind of like this at an angle and then slide it in like this. Caliper mounting brackets held on with two 21mm bolts. And Again, these rotors from the factory are held on by these little stay tabs. Find the easiest way to get these off. Go ahead and put a flathead screwdriver against the stud below it, and you can use that and the little fins that are sticking out to rotate that off until you can get enough of an angle on it. And sometimes they don't want to bite onto the threads, and they'll just keep rotating flat. And looks like that's what's going to happen. Let's see if I can't get a little lip. There's one. You just go ahead and break these off. They come like this from the factory to hold the rotor on to the assembly as it's going down the assembly line. So that way everything stays nice and flush. And the machines can do their job. But that's not really necessary for us. I'm gonna use some diagonal side cutters. Take that off. Next, to remove your rotor, first make sure that your e-brake's not on, especially if you have one of these that's a manual. If you have your e-brake, handbrake, emergency brake, whatever you want to call it, if it's on, you won't be able to get this rotor off. So make sure that's not on. Next thing you want to do is get yourself a sizable hammer, and you're going to hit it in between the lug nut studs. If you're concerned about hitting these and damaging the threads, go ahead and put your lug nuts on a couple of turns, and that will protect them from you hitting them with your hammer. All right. Go ahead and install that new rotor and make sure it's down flush and seated neatly on the hub. Next, go ahead and grab your caliper mounting bracket and remove your old hardware from the bracket. And with your new set of brake pads, you should receive a new set of hardware. Go ahead and install this just as the old ones were. And make sure you press these down tight and with your little tangs sticking inwards. And what these are actually going to do is these are kind of little springs for your caliper, and they sit on this and it keeps the caliper where it's supposed to be. Next, get yourself some brake parts lubricant. And right along this bar where your brake pad will be sliding, go ahead and give that a little bit of lubricant. Doesn't need a lot. About a drop on each side. Next, a quick tip for this is when you're before you put this back onto the rotor, go ahead and install your brake pads. This will save you quite a bit of headache, and you're going to have to lift up on these pieces of your hardware to squeeze those in. And once you get them in, go ahead and press that new brake pad downwards, and with this one, after you finish installing it, pull that one upwards so you have the most room to get this back onto the rotor. That wasn't fighting me so much. And slide that right to the edge. So you should be left with something like this. Put that brake pad caliper on. Start both of the bolts, and then squeeze your brake pads together. Get that thing nice and centered on there. Next, we're going to go ahead and compress the caliper. Go ahead and get yourself an old brake pad and your handy C-clamp. And yes, before anybody says something, I know that they make specialty tools to compress your calipers. They typically last about 6 months before they break. Where I've had this C-clamp for going on probably over 10 years now, and it's done every single one of the jobs I've asked of it without giving me no crap back. So I'll just keep using my C-clamp. And before you install your caliper, make sure you press your guide pins back and ensure that they are free and well lubricated. Next, when you install, you got this little slit here. Your hardware is going to rest on that. So start by installing the top first.
You've got mail.
And then the bottom. The bottom you're gonna have to press in a little bit hard, because like I said, with your hardware acting with those little springs on it, it's actually going to be pushing your caliper back out. And go ahead and put those bolts down tight. And the last thing you want to make sure you do before reinstalling your tire is go ahead and get yourself a can of brake clean and spray down that new rotor. When these new rotors are manufactured, they cover them in oil so they don't rust while they're sitting in their boxes. And if you leave that oil on there, it's going to make a bunch of smoke when you start driving this, and it's bad for your new brake pads because your brake pads will actually absorb that oil and it'll take a little bit of life off your brake pads, and obviously nobody wants that. But other than that, that's how you do a rear brake job on the 2012. If this video helped you out, leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you all next time.